Okay, so then let's start out with just taking a this is like 2 slides about lead and lead poisoning because some people think, well, there's so many dangerous things that are out there and there's so many hazards in our rental properties. Why is lead sort of separated out or we call special attention to it? There's a lot of disclosures and things we have to do for lead. And the reason is because lead is a very toxic substance. It's a metal and it's just very poisonous. Now, lead is a naturally occurring element. It's found naturally occurring in the earth, and there's a lot of items in our daily life, materials that we come into contact with that contain lead. But the reason it's dangerous, as I mentioned, is because it's toxic, and there's just very severe negative physical consequences, mental outcomes, and behavioral things that can happen if people come into contact with lead. It's too much or too high of levels. It just really, really has a excuse me, deleterious effects on people, and in particular children. As we go reviewing the laws, you're going to see a lot of these laws are aimed specifically at children. And that's because, of course, children are still growing, their brains are still developing, and these leads just really target, the children's brains and just can very adversely affect their development over time. You can see here some of the health issues that might arise with lead poisoning. But again, I mentioned, particularly in children, it just causes brain damage, which can continue to affect them throughout their entire life. And we were chit-chatting a little bit before the meeting started, but you already heard this, that lead, we're just going to talk about, of course, there's lead in a lot of different things. We're just going to talk about lead as it relates to rental housing. And in rental housing and in all types of housing, we find it in 2 different areas. Paint, one of them is paint, but this is paint that was manufactured before 1978. Once they discovered how bad it was banned. So hopefully eventually one of these days we won't encounter it anymore, but some of the older buildings properties still do have it. And lead was originally added to the paint was because it helped it to dry faster. It made it last longer. And I just learned, Heidi mentioned a couple minutes ago, that it also helped to prevent mold. But they didn't know that all of these hazardous side effects were in the paint. Once all the experts and scientists and everybody, let all of us know how dangerous lead was, they stopped adding these lead into the paint. Why is the paint dangerous then in our rental properties? Paint can be intact. In other words, there's a completely painted surface. Nothing is wrong with it, but the lead gets ingested because in particular, the children start to chew on the surfaces. They'll be gnawing on the little door ledges and window ledges when they can reach them. I remember my younger sister, this is 35, 40 years ago, she had a crib and she would just gnaw on that edge of the crib. She probably ingested some of that lead. So, children put things in their mouth, and this is how they can get contaminated with the lead, even though there's nothing wrong with the paint. But a lot of the paint and the lead hazards and the health issues are caused by the cracked or peeling paint. And this causes lead dust, and this is then breathed into or swallowed. So it affects our lungs, it affects our digestive system, and eventually our entire health. So even though some properties are pretty bad, the paint is peeling, but some properties, there's nothing wrong with the paint, but just because there's lead in there, the children do ingest it that way. And then the other way that lead comes into the rental properties is there's lead in the plumbing fixtures. Some of the pipes, faucets, or fittings, or the solder there, if they were, made, manufactured, installed before 1986, they contain this. Now, I'm hoping we don't have faucets around, your rental properties before 1986. So it's not necessarily so much this stuff, but the pipes still have a lot of lead-based paint, a lot of lead in them. And what happens there is the lead sort of leaches into the water. And then, of course, we drink the water, and that's how it reaches our bodies. And this still is a big problem, especially in some of the older or less affluent municipalities, because they still have those lead-based service lines. We're not going to talk about it in this presentation. We're just really going to restrict it to the paint, because we don't have the lead in our, plumbing lines, in our fittings, faucets, etc., in the properties. And there's really nothing we can do about those service lines that come into our properties. That's all the purview of the cities and municipalities. Okay, so that's why the lead is so bad and why there's so much attention that is focused on the lead. Next, let's take a overview of some of the federal, state, and local laws that pertain to lead. None of these are new. All of us should be really familiar with these laws because they've been around forever and ever and ever. But let's go ahead and review them to make sure we understand what's required from them. So the big one that everybody is, constant, every time you rent to a tenant or you renew a tenant, you're coming into contact with this one, even though you may not know the formal name. And this law is called the Residential Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act. Everybody should be familiar with this one, also known by Title 10, been around for a long, long time. And like we said just a couple minutes ago, it applies to any type of building built before 1978, because that's when lead was still prevalent. And the whole point of this law is they want to protect all of us, but particularly children, from the lead hazards. We talked about how there's paint, but it also lead is found in dust and even naturally occurs in the soil. And the Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act, I'm just going to call it the act from now on, we as landlords are required to give some disclosures as well as some testing requirements. So we'll go ahead and review those. There are 3 documents that we as landlords have to give to tenants. None of these are new unless you're unless you're a new landlord or you just, you haven't really had much practice. You should be completely familiar with these disclosures already, but let's go ahead and review them. So the first one is called the Lead Exposure Pamphlet. And the title of this pamphlet is Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. It's created by the EPA. Let me show it to you guys. It's this guy. It's this blue form. It's required for us to attach it to all new leases as well as all renewals. Don't forget, I think sometimes some landlords will give it to, the tenants when they first will rent to them, but then they forget you also have to give it to the tenants for during the renewals. And what it does is it just really makes the tenants aware of what the lead risks are. Some of these renters or tenants are first-time tenants, or of course, they're not homeowners. They don't know, they don't use paint. They're not aware of some of these lead hazards that are there in the paint. So it just makes them aware of all the bad stuff that can happen with the lead paint. So it explains, hey, this is why the lead paint is dangerous to you. This is how it can get into your body, and this is why it's bad for everybody. So again, just an informational pamphlet to have everybody to be aware of the paint hazards. The other document that landlords are required to give to the tenants is some sort of warning statement, and this one is called the Disclosure of Information on Lead-Based Paint and or Lead-Based Paint Hazards. So let me show you that one. And again, this should not be new to everybody. This is from the Illinois Realtors, but every organization or people sometimes tweak it, the title, and of course it's going to have different logos, but it all contains the same information. Let me make it a little bigger here. So it lets everybody know, hey, is there any lead-based paint present there? If it is, you got to let me know where. And then do I have any records and reports available to it? And then everybody signs that they got a copy of it. If you are a real estate agent, you also, by law, have to, acknowledge that you've given this out, and then everybody signs this information. So it's basically just disclosure saying, again, hey, there's lead-based paint on there. I'm letting you know that there is some lead-based paint on there in case you have received a report where it is, and everybody signs. One important piece of information I think some of us forget is you have to hold on to this warning statement or from this disclosure for 3 years in case you ever get sued or some sort of action is taken against you. They are going to require for you to produce this, so don't forget about holding on to these. You shouldn't be throwing away your documents after 1 or 2 or 3 years anyway, but this one in particular. And then the last piece of information or documents that we have to give our tenants is any tests or records that we have done, but that's only if lead was found in your rental properties. And don't forget, it's not just the actual unit itself, but in the multifamily properties, it's also any common areas or other units. And what it says is that if we landlords renovate an occupied rental unit, or in multifamily ones, the common areas, and we're going to mess around with the painted surfaces with 60 days or before we begin that, we're supposed to give the tenants that blue little brochure or pamphlet that I mentioned. Remember this one here? We're supposed to give this to our tenants again 60 days before we do any renovations. Not only that, but in the multifamily properties, we're supposed to then also post some information that we're going to be renovating there in the common areas. So we're supposed to tell them, okay, we're going to be renovating, painting the walls and the hallways. We're going to start in such and such date, and we're going to end on such and such date. So that's this act here. And then the last one is, I know, Heidi, you mentioned this one before, Oh, I think this is what you were talking about. There's the one called the renovation, repair, and painting rule. And again, this is not aimed to landlords. This is aimed for contractors, but we really need to be aware about this. And this again applies to buildings built before 1978. And they specifically outline homes, including the rental properties, childcare facilities, and preschools. I mean, just look at how they really single out any buildings that, are associated with children, because again, they really want to protect the children. And the goal of this renovation, repair, and painting rule is they want to protect against the lead dust, not so much the paint, but the dust that sort of comes up into the air when we're doing these renovations or repairs, and the lead-based paint is, disturbed there. So the contractors need to follow this rule when on the inside they're going to disturb more than 6 square feet, or on the outside more than 20 square feet. You think about it, that is a tiny area. I mean, 6 square feet is a 2 foot by 3 foot area. Anytime you're painting, a wall, you're gonna this is going to come into play. But just because you're painting, this doesn't apply. It's when you're disturbing it. So let's say you got to cut a hole in the wall, then you got to patch it, and then you're going to paint it. Then this rule kicks in. If you're just painting on top of it, this rule doesn't apply for your contractor. And what it says is that the contractors who do these repairs and they disturb the paint, this is what Hadi was referring to. They have to be certified by the EPA. And we'll get here in a second to how you can find a list of these certified EPA contractors. I'll give you guys a link. And these contractors, number one, got to be certified, and they have to follow all of these work practices. I saw the document. It is like pages and pages and pages long of all of this stuff they have to do. Since it didn't apply to us, of course, I didn't include it on here. But this is when, the contractors look like the space suits. They're wearing those suits and the breathing apparatus and all of the stuff that they have to practice safely there. And then this is one, I don't know if you guys have ever done these types of renovations there in your rental properties, just out of curiosity, because they're supposed to provide us with this other pamphlet called the Lead Safe Certified Guide to Renovate Right. Let me show that one to you guys. That's this one. So theoretically, if you hire an EPA certified, contractor, they're supposed to give us this pamphlet. If you guys have ever received this from a contractor, EPA one, let us know, but I've never heard of this. I've never seen any contractor give this to anybody. So that might be another one of those rules where, I guess people just don't particularly follow it too much anymore. And then just last little note there, when we're saying, contractors are the ones that have to comply with this, right away we think about painters. But it doesn't just apply to painters. It's anybody, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, anybody who's going to disturb some of the surface area there, inside or outside, are required to follow these rules here. But in Illinois, it's called the Illinois Lead Poisoning Prevention Act. And again, they're really trying to reduce the lead incidence in children. And we're not going to talk about these, but because they don't pertain to landlords. But this act talks about you can't use lead-based lead-based materials. You can't sell these lead-based items. For those of you guys who are adults who have children, there's like a list of toys that contain lead you're not supposed to buy. This is what this Illinois Lead Poisoning Prevention Act is talking about. It talks about some warning labels, and this talks about, okay, this is the blood lead levels that you have to have before it's considered contaminated or not. And this is the one that's most important for us. It does require screening for lead for all the kids 6 years or under. And there's a whole bunch of other requirements we're not going to talk about. What this act does, just like the federal one, is we got to give tenants, that pamphlet for the new and the renewal leases. And then we have to give them that disclosure. We have to give them, if there is a lead contamination in our properties, we're supposed to give them a notice that there is one, unless basically the landlord has fixed it. And we'll go through this whole process about how you get the certificate here. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the screening, because this is where we get roped into this process about, we get notified that there's a problem at our rental properties in terms of lead-based paint or other substances. According to this act, one of the requirements is, like I said, that kids have to be screened for lead in their blood. This is conducted by the Illinois Department of Public Health, IDPH, and they require that all kids 6 months to 6 years old be tested in areas that are classified as high risk areas. Now you're probably wondering, well, is my area high risk? So here's the answer. The entire city of Chicago is classified as high risk. So the kids who live in that area are definitely being tested. And then the Illinois Department of Public Health does have this list of areas that are identified as being high risk. They must not have updated this list since 2016 because that's the most current one I could find. Let me show it to you guys. So here is the look, it shows you the entire state of Illinois. And then I went ahead and I highlighted Cook County. You can see here all of Chicago. And here are the zip codes in Chicago. I'm sorry, in Cook County. I look really quickly. Shoot, the areas that I have my properties in are not here. Oh, shoot, there is one. This is Blue Island. Darn it. So one of my properties is in there. For those of you guys who are familiar with Blue Island, it's a very historical area. There are properties well before, 1978 that's probably included. If any of you guys want me to post this document here in the chat, let me know. I'll go ahead because I know some of you guys have properties here in some of the other areas. Okay, so in these areas that are considered high risk, when the kids go to their pediatricians, they go to the doctors, they're going to be tested. It's nothing that anybody has to agree to. And what happens is when they run these tests, if they identify high levels of blood in there, the doctor or the nurse is going to automatically report it to the Illinois Department of Public Health. So all of this takes place without landlords being aware of, consenting to, nothing. We're not involved in this part at all. Where we do get roped into this, or we become involved, is at this point, because then the Illinois Department of Public Health is going to go to your property and conduct a building inspection. They want to find out how these kids are getting contaminated or affected, come into contact with this lead. So they're going to talk to you. They're going to talk to the tenant, hey, what's going on in here, or how are you coming into contact? They're going to inspect the building, and they can do some sampling of, the paint and the dust. Once they do that, this is where the department then sends this report to you, because you're the owner, us landlords, and you're thinking, well, okay, whatever they find, I'm just not going to tell the tenant. Nope, that's not going to be the case, because they're also going to send that report to your tenant, which is only fair. They're in that test, they're going to tell you, yes, we found lead. No, we didn't find lead. And then they're going to, in the report, give us all the information that the landlords need to know. Where is it? I don't know. All the information, where it is, all the information that we need to identify and take care of the lead hazard in our properties. Then our next step for us is we're given what's called a mitigation notice. And this means that now we're going to have to fix the problem. Mitigation and abatement means the activities that we're going to have to do to basically get rid of, take care of the lead problem. And hopefully all of you guys are familiar with the difference between these two terms, but I spelled it out just in case. Mitigation means you can fix it. Maybe in this report, in this mitigation notice, they're saying, okay, scrape the window ledge and just repaint it. That's different from abatement, which means you have to remove it or encapsulate it. So nope, you've got to completely rip out the door and put a new door in, or you've got to completely encapsulate it with primer and repaint it, or whatever activities are. But they're going to tell you what you need to do to fix it. And then, because people are bad about doing things, they do give us a deadline that we have to do everything by. 30 days if the Illinois Department of Public Health lets us know, hey, we found it in the blood, or if it was reported to them other ways, they've got 30 days, that way, or we've got 90 days if it's reported to us another way. Yep. So once we get that mitigation notice, we do need to let our tenants know. And then again, like we were talking about before, we need to post that notice. So here's some of the information that you have to post within your rental property once you get this notice from the Illinois Department of Public Health. Okay. Then we, the landlords, have to go through and fix the problem. We have to do that mitigation or abatement as it was spelled out to us. We can't DIY it. We've got to use that certified contractor. So this is where that link I gave to you to the EPA, now you've got to find that certified contractor, and you can use that link. And this is where the contractor has to follow all of that renovation rules that we talked about earlier. Once the work is done, then the Illinois Department of Public Health will conduct an inspection. And I'll explain in a second why I highlighted here in bold. And in this inspection, they're going to say, yep, work was done. And they're going to test it again and say, yep, that lead hazard is no longer present. And the reason that I bolded it is as of 2023, last year, there was a slight little change in this one. Before this inspection was, they may or may not come out. Now it is will. They absolutely will conduct this follow-up inspection. I kind of only imagine that some landlords, some people were saying, yeah, I fixed it. And then they kind of really didn't. And I don't know, maybe they found too many incidences that I don't know. But now this follow-up inspection, they're going to check up on you to make sure everything is taken care of. So if they go to that follow-up inspection and they passes it, you're done. They're going to give you that certificate of compliance, proving that everything is taken care of. But if you fail that inspection again, they're going to give you another notice there, and you have to keep going. Contact your contractor again. They got to try to fix it again. You got to go through the follow-up inspection. You're going to keep repeating and repeating this process until you finally get it right and you pass everything. So I can imagine this process probably takes quite a while to go through and fix some of these issues here. Okay, so that's Illinois. And then last one, I'm going to zip through this one because Cook County also has some laws. I found some for DuPage County as well. I think a lot of the counties also have their own version of the laws, but it almost is identical for that Illinois law. So I don't know, like I said, why they have to keep repeating and repeating these laws. Too many layers of government, but it is what it is. And if you notice this one here in Cook County, it's actually a very fairly recent law. And instead of being the Illinois Department of Public Health agency being the one that enforces it, this one is the Cook County Department of Public Health. And this one does apply to us. And again, they're targeting places where the children are at a lot, childcare facilities and school. And these are called regulated facilities by Cook County. And what this act says here is that you can't use lead in these, anything that touched by children. The fixtures or objects. Even this is the one that also prohibits items that are used or worn by children, clothes, jewelry, food. I mean, there was a huge list of items, which, I mean, common sense. You can't use basically lead in everything and anything, including, some of these areas. And then this law has requirement. It doesn't pertain to landlords, but it talks about businesses that, when you sell, transfer, distribute lead bearing items, you can't do that. And then there's even requirements for some of these home improvement stores that sell the paint. But again, these don't really pertain to us, but this one does. And what they're saying is for these regulated facilities, remember, that's all houses. We landlords have to maintain these houses in order to prevent any sort of lead contamination, lead. Okay, got a question here. Deborah says, is this a costly process? That's a great question, Hadi. Let's keep that in mind when we get to your section, when you talk about how you test for the lead and, fixing all of the lead. If you guys don't mind, Deborah, we're going to answer your question when Hadi starts talking about the whole process because he's been through it many, many times, I imagine. All right, so hold on. We'll hold on to your question there. But again, I'm not going to go through this because this exactly repeats the process for Illinois about what Cook County is going to do. They're going to inspect the house if there's reports of lead in the blood. Then they're going to have an inspection report that you're going to get. Then they're going to issue you this mitigation notice. Hey, you got to fix it. Then this is a slight difference between Illinois and Cook County is that before you can embark on fixing the issue, you first have to submit your plan to the Cook County department there, and they have to review and approve it. And then they may conduct a follow-up inspection. If you don't pass, you're going to have to continue there. And then if you do pass, they're going to give you the certificate of compliance.